Congressman Bacon, thank you so much for accepting this interview and taking time to be with us today.
My pleasure.
Congressman, many European leaders are worried after President Trump suggested that the US might leave NATO, calling the alliance ineffective. However, Romania accepted US requests to use our military bases for the ongoing war in Iran. How do you view his comments?
Well, first of all, Romania is a very outstanding ally, so we're very grateful. I used to serve in NATO, so I know firsthand. I was a colonel in NATO, and so I really appreciate the friendship with Romania in so many different areas, not just one, many areas. I do disagree with the president's comments about NATO. He should be investing in strengthening NATO because you need allies, and his continuous, criticizing NATO and diminishing them means that it's hard for them to step up like what we're doing right now with Iran and try to clear the Straits of Hormuz. You can't talk down to your friends and then demand right away that they jump when you need them to jump. And so I want to strengthen NATO. We should invest and build up NATO because free countries have to work together on threats that we have. We got to work together.
Do you think this rhetoric is already damaging the alliance?
Yeah, I think there's been damage to the alliance. I think the denigrating some of the leaders in NATO and some of the particular countries has not been helpful. I think Greenland, the threats towards Greenland was very dumb. It was hurtful, and it solved nothing. It was just threatening Greenland and Denmark. And by the way, Denmark's been a great ally. They've lost more people per capita in Afghanistan and Iraq than any other country, right, outside of the United States. And so they were a great ally, but to denigrate them and threaten Greenland, I think caused a lot of damage. And it's going to take a while to repair. And I'm of the belief, first of all, after 9/11, NATO declared Article 5, and they deployed with us to Afghanistan, and many individual countries helped us out in Iraq. NATO has proven itself.
You said a week ago that if Trump will decide to leave NATO, this will destroy the Republican Party.
Yeah, there's many like me that are Ronald Reagan-type Republicans. I believe that America has an important role to defend freedom, democracy, free markets, the values that we believe. I also know America can't do things on its own. We can't counter Russia, China, Iran, terrorism by ourselves. We need friends. We need NATO to help counter, particularly in Ukraine with Russia. We need Japan, Australia, when it comes to the threats in the Pacific. And we work with allies such as Israel in the Middle East. You got to have friends. And to walk away from NATO, something that Dwight Eisenhower helped build, one of my favorite presidents, it would be a mortal wound, I believe, to the Republican Party.
Congressman Bacon, President Trump says that the U.S. is close to reaching a deal with Iran. Yesterday, he gave another ultimatum. Tehran says that there are no negotiations. From your position in Congress, do you have any indication that the war might end soon?
I think it's going to have to end in about a month. I think that's about as much patience that the Congress will have. At that point, it'll be 2 months along. Let me back up. I served in the Middle East 4 times in the Air Force. Iran has been killing Americans since 1979. We estimate about 1,000 Americans have been killed by Iranian terrorism. So, for example, the Beirut barracks in 1983, we lost 241 military people in those barracks. I had some friends in the Khobar Towers in 1996 when it was destroyed, so I lost some friends, and that was an Iranian terrorist who did that. When I served in Iraq, we were attacked every day by proxy groups from Iran, and we estimate 609 Americans in Iraq from Iranian militias. So my point is, Iran's been at war with us. I feel like we had to deal with them. And so this was long overdue. That said, I don't have a very clear direction where the president's going, what's the end state. Ultimately, we'd like to get a new government in Iran that's not anti-West, that would want to have peace with its neighbors. That's the ultimate goal. But if we can't get that, when do we say stop? And I think the president's been pretty vague on where we're going, what the next steps are. In fact, there was some criticism yesterday from the chairman of the Armed Services Committee that he wasn't getting a lot of answers on what's next. So I'm giving you a sort of a tough answer here. We had to deal with Iran. They've been killing us for a long time. But the president needs to articulate clear goals and an end state out. How are we going to stop this?
Because I know there were some discussions after the briefing, the closed-door briefing yesterday. CNN reported that several Republicans might stop to accept fundings for this war. So do you think that this might happen in the future?
That's a little too early. I do think we have to do some supplemental funding for this because we need to rebuild or remake the cruise missiles that we fired, all the bombs that we've dropped on Iran. We got to replenish. And if we want to deter Russia and China, we got to refill these munitions that we've spent. And so we do need a supplemental. I just don't know how much. If the president and his team are saying $200 billion, I doubt that it's going to be $200 billion. But we need to do something to rebuild our arsenal.
Because you served in the military against Iran, and you know to evaluate the enemy very well. Now Iran is building up defense on Kharg Island, and we know that American troops are heading to the island. Yesterday, an Iranian official said that there will be another Vietnam. Do you think a ground operation could lead to another Vietnam?
I don't think the president's going to do that. Putting troops into Iran, boots on the ground, I think it's a very unlikely scenario. Maybe Kharg Island, could be maybe around the Straits of Hormuz to help clean that up there, but I doubt it. I think the president's using these troops as negotiating leverage with Iran, an added threat to them, so I think it's more of a negotiating posture. I also think the military, and I served 30 years in the military, I think they're trying to give the president more options, but to give him an option for airborne troops or the Marines, you got to have them available. So I just think they're making them available so the president has choices and for negotiations.
I would like to ask you about the decision to ease Russian sanctions on Russian oil. Was it a strategic move or was it a mistake that will lead to a more strengthened Kremlin?
I think it was a mistake. By easing the sanctions on Russia, that allows them to make more money to subsidize their war against Ukraine. And we got to remember, Russia is initiating this invasion. They're bombing Ukrainian cities every night. They're killing POWs. I think they've kidnapped around 20,000 Ukrainian children. I could just go on and on. It's war crimes. And so we should be doing tougher sanctions on Russia and not easing those sanctions. I know the president and his team are worried about gas prices, but to release sanctions on Russia, I would say there's a phrase we have in America called penny wise, pound foolish. In other words, yeah, you may save a little bit right now, but it's going to cost us more in the long run by easing these sanctions. Easing sanctions helps Russia fight the war, and it prolongs the war. We got to convince Putin he cannot win and that the pain is too high. And so we should be doing more to penalize Russia, not less.
And one last question. Iran threatened Romania. They said that we will face the consequences for accepting the U.S. request. If President Trump decides to leave NATO, can Romania still rely on U.S. help in the future?
Well, leaving NATO is not an option. And I think the president would ruin his presidency if he pulled out of NATO. He'll go down in history as one of the worst presidents in the history of our country if he does this. So I doubt he'll do it, but there's always grounds for bilateral relationships, and we should have an alliance system like NATO, but I also think we should have a lot of bilateral ties with Romania. And I know for a fact, just talking to the leadership in Romania, I've had many guests here over the years, I know the ambassador, that there's a true desire for friendship with our country, and I want to make sure that we reciprocate. So regardless of NATO, we should have close ties with Romania.
Thank you so much, Congressman.
Thank you.
And thank you for being a friend of Romania.
Oh, my pleasure.